the western part of the state near the Mississippi River. And so they said to Bernard and Ellen, why don't you come out here to Wisconsin? We're farmers, we're doing wonderful farmland out here, it's cheap, so why don't you just come out here and live with us? So they did, they moved to Wisconsin. That's why he's a connection to Wisconsin. It's a little town near Prescott, Wisconsin, on the St. Croix River. So they had a farm there, and they were married already, of course, but they produced 16 children. Now, I think they should be canonized. Now, sadly, 2 of the little girls died during the diphtheria epidemic that struck the nation around that time. And Father Solanus himself got some infection in his throat. So he had this kind of a high, wispy voice. It was hard to hear him because of that diphtheria. So that affected him. So anyway, they grew up on this farm, and they had 9 boys, so they formed their own baseball team, the Mighty Caseys, he called themselves. So he had this kind of a very Catholic upbringing. The father would gather the children together every night before going to bed and read something from the Bible and have some prayers. They prayed the rosary every day. And so and they went to church every Sunday. They were very strong Catholic roots that they had. So that's the atmosphere that he grew up in. He was baptized Bernard Francis. His father's name was Bernard also, so they called his father Solanus Barney Casey. Okay, that was a nickname. Born in 1870. He had to quit. He went to elementary school, but when it came time for high school, he dropped out because he felt he should go to work to support the family. They were struggling with all those children. And farming was not always reliable. They had a lot of troubles to farm. So he went to work. His first job was as a log roller on the St. Croix River. That's a dangerous occupation. You stand on a log in the middle of the river, and with a big long pole, you keep the logs from jamming up. You can fall off the log very easily, of course, and that happened several times. Later on, he got a job as a prison guard in Minnesota, the Minnesota State Prison, a place called Stillwater. And there he met one of the Jesse James gang, Cole Younger, and they kind of have a little friendship. And when Barney left, Cole Younger gave him his old trunk. He said, I'm not going to be leaving this place, so I won't give that trunk. You can take it. So he kept that trunk, and every time he was transferred, he used that criminal's trunk. Okay? Later on, he got a job as a streetcar motorman. First in Appleton, driving a streetcar. He was like 17 years old. But he heard that there was a better offer up in Superior, Wisconsin, to get a job as a streetcar motorman there, because Superior was growing like crazy. And so he moved up there. And there he met a girl and fell in love. A girl named Rebecca Tobin, another Irish girl. He even proposed to her, but her mother would hear none of it. I don't want you to messing around with those Caseys. So she sends her daughter out to a boarding school in St. Paul. So Barney lost that one. Anyway, he was beginning to think, maybe, where am I being called in life? What is God calling me to? He thought, well, maybe the priesthood. I don't know. Well, anyway, he is driving this streetcar in Superior one evening, I think it was the summertime. And all of a sudden, he sees a big crowd of people right in the middle of the tracks ahead of him. He had to stop the streetcar to get out to see what's happening. And he sees there's a sailor with a knife in his hand, and he was stabbing this young girl in the throat. And so she died right there on the tracks. Of course, the guy was arrested and hauled off to jail. But it just really shook Barney very badly. And after work that night, he went to the Catholic Church, which was open in those days at night. And he stayed the whole rest of the night praying, asking God, I have to do something about the sin and the violence in the world. What should I do? So he talked to his pastor the next day, who was a Franciscan friar. And he said, maybe I should be a priest. And the pastor said, well, you come from a good family. I'm sure that, maybe you have a vocation. What do I have to do? Barney said. You have to go to the seminary in Milwaukee called St. Francis de Sales Seminary. So, okay. He gets on the train and comes down here to this very place and has his high school education down here. He's gone to so-called minor seminary. And he did okay with his studies. When it came time to go on to the college program, which was also here, he had a very difficult time. His very first year, he had a hard time keeping up with his studies. So at the end of the year, the faculty said, we can't keep you anymore. You're not going to make it. So they sent him home. So you can't come back. He came back brokenhearted. He thought, sure, this is what God was calling him to, and here he flunks out, okay? A real blow to his sense of self-esteem. What should he do now? Went back to his pastor, the Franciscan friar, and the pastor said, well, maybe a religious order will take you. Well, it doesn't take anybody, So he told him to give him two addresses, his own order in Chicago, their headquarters, and the Capuchins in Detroit. So he wrote to both places. The pastor wrote a nice letter of recommendation for him. And lo and behold, he's accepted at both places. Sight unseen. You can't do that nowadays. So now what should he do? Where's God calling him? So he made a novena to the Blessed Mother, which ended on December 8th, Immaculate Conception. And that day he heard a voice inside of him saying, go to Detroit, which meant the Capuchins. So he packs his trunk, he got from this criminal, and gets on the train to Detroit. He arrives there Christmas Eve. So he was really felt terrible at first. He was completely alone. He didn't know anybody there. But that night, the custom was, and still is, in those days, the custom was the friars get up at midnight for midnight mass, of course. But before they do that, they incense the corridors. Incense. He thought that was kind of cool, nice smelling incense here to get up to. So he attended midnight mass. He was so touched by the ceremonies of the friars and their brown habits and so on. He felt much more at home then. So he got through the first couple of weeks, and he was received into the order as a novice. And he made it through that novitiate year, made his first vows 1 year later. Then he was sent to Milwaukee for further studies. He had to do his college program at St. Francis of Assisi Parish, where I live right now, okay? That was our seminary in those days, college and theology seminary together. So he goes to the college program, and he got through okay with the college. Then he had to go on to the theology studies. And there he had a very difficult time, because first of all, the textbooks were all in Latin, which he didn't know all that well, and the lectures were all in German. He didn't know a word of German. Why were they in German? Because most of our friars came from Germany in those days. And they spoke the German language, even when they were teaching. So anyway, he had a hard time with the studies in theology. He could not write good exams. So at the end of the 4 years, the faculty was divided. Half of them said, we cannot ordain this man. He doesn't know his theology well enough. He'll confuse people. The other half said, but look what a holy person he is. We should not deprive the church of this wonderful man with his wonderful holiness. So they wrote to Rome, and they got it, they compromised. They wrote to Rome and said, what should we do? And Rome said, well, you can ordain him. In those days, they called him a simplex priest, which meant He could say Mass privately and publicly, but he could not preach, and he could not hear confessions. Okay, well, that's all right with Solanus, you know. By the way, his name was Bernard, remember? When you become a religious in those days, you had to change your name to a saint's name. Well, he wanted to be a missionary, so he read about this Franciscan friar called St. Francis Solano, who was a missionary to Latin America. And so he said, I'm going to take that name, Francis Solanus. They dropped the Francis after a while, just called him Solanus. So that's how he got his name. So anyway, they got permission to ordain him a simplex priest. He was ordained at St. Francis Friary, where I live, in the parish church, and said his first Mass in Appleton at our parish of St. Joseph's in Appleton. Then he was assigned to our parish in Yonkers, New York, which is a suburb of New York City, a large Capuchin parish there, and still is. The pastor said to himself, what am I going to do with this guy? He can't preach, can't hear confessions. So what does he do? He made him sacristan. Take care of train the altar boys and take care of the sacristy, okay? Well, that wasn't okay with Solanus. I'll be close to the Blessed Sacrament. Isn't that cool? Later on, the superior said, we need somebody to, because our brother who was at the front desk is sick, so we want you to take over the front desk. The job was called porter. So he's the first person you see when you walk in the Friary parish entrance, and the first voice you hear when you make a phone call would be this Father Solanus. So people began, coming to him and stopping in to visit and so on, and they found him so easy to talk to. They would tell him their troubles. He was such a good listener. They would tell him about their heartaches, and their kids were having problems, or their husband or their wife were having problems. The marriage was on the rocks. They were sick. They had all kinds of health problems. And he would just listen to them, and then he would say, well, and they would say, well, please pray for me, Father Solanus. Oh, yes, I'll pray for you. But you have to be involved also. You have to pray yourself. Or you have to make some kind of sacrifice. Maybe go and visit somebody in a nursing home or the hospital, or maybe volunteer some time in the soup kitchen there, or give a donation to the Capuchin missions, whatever you can do to show God that you also are involved in this process of getting help. Okay, my prayers will be there for you, but you need to be involved also. People began reporting wonderful healings. People were supposed to go to the hospital for surgery. When they went there, they said, there's nothing wrong with you. Father Solanus is praying for me, okay? Or the marriages were renewed, repaired. Children began to turn out better than they were before. They were getting into trouble. There was less violence in the neighborhood. People were saying, if you want answers to your prayers, go talk to the holy priest. Not the other guys, don't they? People in Yonkers figured out why he could not hear confessions. Here was what they came to figure out. If Father Solanus knew how people were sinning, it would break his heart. That was their rationale why he couldn't hear confessions. Probably true, but it was not the real reason. So they saw holiness in this man, okay? Now, as these things were happening, it got all around the neighborhood. So the superior said to him, Father Solanus, one day, you need to keep a record of these things. Write down the person's name, what the problem was, and how you prayed for them and they prayed and so on, and what the outcomes were. So he began doing that. At the end of the day, he would make this recording. We have 8 huge notebooks of these kind of case studies, okay? You write everything down. And so he was there, I think, about 12 years, if I'm not mistaken. Then he was transferred to Manhattan. We have 2 parishes in lower Manhattan, very poor parishes. And he was again appointed as porter. And so he got the same kind of people coming in with troubles and telling them their woes and so on. And they ask his prayers, he'd pray for them, and they have these wonderful healings and reconciliations going on. He got to keep putting them in the notebooks, and so on. Then he was finally transferred to Detroit in 1924. And there, he was in the front office again, but he was not alone. There was another brother who took care of the telephone and the doorbell, but they wanted Father Solanus to be there for people to come and talk to him. Because people often came because, they began to hear things about this priest who had these wonderful abilities. So they began to line up to talk to Father Solanus. And all he had was a little desk and a little chair, and a bunch of chairs lined up against the wall where people would sit down and wait their turn to talk to him. And nobody ever seemed to get impatient because they knew they get the same kind of respectful attention that the other people were getting. And again, the same thing began to happen. Healings and reconciliations and children turning out better than they were before, and people just, sometimes he would say to them, well, now, you say you got this terrible illness and you have to go to the hospital. Let's give the doctors a little surprise. Let's just pray about this, okay? And sure enough, the next day the person would say, I don't have any more symptoms. Let's give the doctors a surprise. Well, they really did. Sometimes he would say he would not promise anything. Sometimes he'd say, well, just trust a good God, trust a good God. Sometimes he would say, well, let's see what the good God wants. And maybe, you'd be asked to bear his cross. Can you do that? Yes, I will. I will pray for you. And nobody ever got upset because they were not granted their prayers, because they knew they had this man's holiness to guide them and his faith. So even though they weren't healed or whatever, they always walked out feeling stronger and able to bear their burden, whatever it might be. People began to come to him, and he would be there from 9 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. Except he would never miss prayers, and he would never miss meals. A good balanced life, you see. But other than that, he'd be there morning till night. And one time at the dinner, the guys were lined up there was a nice big cake there, and the friar head of Solanus took a great big piece of cake, and Solanus took a little tiny piece. And the friar said, why don't you take a big piece like I do? And Solanus says, well, big furnaces need more fuel. He had that little Irish wit, it was really, really neat to see that. Anyway, again, one time he was visited by the mayor of Detroit, came to talk to him. The governor of Michigan came to talk to him. Protestants and Jews came to talk to him. The reputation just spread all over the Detroit area and way beyond. So he was very, very well known. One of my great stories about that is one time, he was always the first one up in the morning. One morning the doorbell rang at 4:30 in the morning. So Father Solanus went down to answer the doorbell. There's a young guy standing there. And the fellow says, come on in, what do you want? The fellow says, where's that guy Solanus? And the fellow said, well, he's here, but why do you want to see him? And the guy said, I want to kill him. And the fellow said, well, that should be discussed. Sit down. The guy sits down and tells him his story. He lived with his mother on the east side of Detroit, not far from the monastery. And his mother's and he's head of the East Side Communist Party. And his mother's all upset with him because he's involved with these communists. She keeps telling him, go and talk to Father Solanus. He'll help you, So he figured if I get rid of Solanus, my mother will be off my back. Oh, okay, well, now, but by the time he got done, he ends up saying, can I go to confession? What's he going to do now? All he could say was, well, we have prayers right now, which was true, but you come back in an hour and somebody will be here to hear your confession. He thought sure the guy would not come back, but he did. An hour later he came back, and there's a priest to hear his confession. He came back to the sacraments, came back to the practice of his faith, just talking to this holy old man. Wonderful story. Well, as time went on, his health began to decline, of course, and so the superior decided he needs to retire. So they transferred him to Huntington, Indiana, which was our college program at the time for our seminarians, and it was also a little bit of a retirement home. So there were several old friars there, and he could fit right in with them. That's where I got to live with him. My last 2 years of college were spent in Indiana, and there he was in the friary. I never heard about him before. Well, I guess I did because I was a novice in Detroit, and everybody knew a lot about Father Solanus by that time. But I never met the man until I went to Indiana. And he was so ordinary, he just wanted a group. He'd fit right in. He was always there for prayers and masses and whatnot. And during the day, we knew he was special because, first of all, every day he got a stack of mail, that he had to answer. Then he had to get another Capuchin brother to help him answer all the mail. So, and also, every time the phone rang, most likely would be, is Father Solanus there? On Sunday afternoons and Sundays in the nice weather, there'd be charter buses coming down from Detroit to visit him. It's a 4-hour trip by bus, okay? They'd pack a lunch and they'd sit on our front lawn and eat their lunch. And he'd come out after his lunch and mingle with the people and talk with them. He'd take them into the chapel and have a little service for them. Rosary, Litany of the Blessed Mother, and benediction. He could do those things, okay? Just that he couldn't preach. So, and we would see this, my gosh, it's a whole busload of people coming here once again. Then they go back in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the bus will take off and go back to Detroit. This would happen so many times in the summertime. It's also, I was privileged to have this happen to me. When I was there as my last 2 years of college, my mother and sister got on the train from Fond du Lac, that's where I grew up, and they made the trip to Huntington to visit me. And I'm telling them about Father Solanus. And my mother said, well, listen, your sister is pregnant with her second child, and she has these terrible varicose veins in her legs. My sister's sitting right there. And so my mother said, why don't you have him come down here and bless your sister? My sister said, oh, don't bother him, it's all right. I said, yeah, he'll come. I went to get him. Oh, sure, yeah, I'll come down. So he comes down to the front parlor where we were gathered, my mom and my sister and myself. Oh, what's the problem? So she tells him. I said, well, let's just see what the good God wants. It's always his lead-in. Let's see what the good God wants. So he says a prayer over her, gives her a blessing, and nothing happened. So he went back to his room. The next day they left, went back to Fond du Lac. But the day after, I got a phone call from my mother saying, guess what? Your sister was at the doctor yesterday, and the varicose veins are completely gone. And the doctors can't explain it. Well, you and I know. Okay. So I was so thrilled that my own sister was healed by this holy priest. Okay. So I never forgot that. Plus, one time I wrote an article when I was down there for our Sunday Visitor. It's published in Huntington, Indiana, on the Feast of the Epiphany. I got a little note from Father Solanus thanking me for the article. So that was very well written, he said. However, he said, you made a statement there, I think I have to explain that to you. You said in there that we had to become free of self-love, like the Magi were free of self-love. He said, you know something? Remember, there's such a thing as rightly ordered self-love. We are commanded to love God, our neighbor, and ourselves, right? So we take care of ourselves and so on. He writes that out for me and gives me that note. This is a guy that knows theology well? Ha-ha! Beautiful theology. To love ourselves also, to rightly ordered self-love. Dummy, when I was transferred, I threw it away. I would have kept that thing, right? I didn't realize what I did at the time. Anyway, those are two of my great memories of my time down there. Well, eventually he got more and more sick, and they had to transfer him back to Detroit and put him in the hospital. And while he was there about a week, he's getting weaker and weaker. People came to visit him all the time, you know, and he never lost that Irish wit. One time a woman came in and said, "Oh, Father Solanus, I'm so glad to see you. I've been hearing some people talk about you all the time." He said, "Well, so what? They talk about Jesse James, too." Another time a nun comes in and says, "How about a blessing, Father?" And he says, "Sure, I'll take one." So anyway, the night before he died, our provincial superior, the highest superior, our headquarters is in Detroit, he came to visit Father Solanus. You could see he was in great, great pain. And he said, "Father, where does it hurt?" And Solanus said, "My whole body hurts. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. I'm offering my sufferings that all may be one. If only I could live to see the conversion of the whole world. That's what I'm offering my suffering for." The next day was, I think it was a Friday morning, 1957, July 31st. The nurse came in to check on him at 11 o'clock in the morning. And suddenly he sits up in his bed, stretches out his arms for the crucifix on the wall and says, "I give my soul to Jesus Christ." And he fell back dead. Immediately there was, of course, you know, the undertakers were saying, "This is going to be quite a, you know," so they decided to give 2 full days for people to come and view the body. And indeed, it took 2 full days. They said there were, 20,000 people, something like that, passed by that casket. And they had the funeral mass at the monastery. They had a block off the busy street in front of the monastery. So people could stand outside with loudspeakers to hear the ceremony of his funeral mass. He was buried right there in a little cemetery at the monastery. And immediately then, our brother Leo, first of all, was appointed to be because people were saying, this man should be declared a saint. And they began to send in all kinds of reports of things that they experienced themselves or their loved ones. They were healed and they were helped and so on and so on. So we appointed Brother Leo as kind of the vice postulator, is that what it's called? The connection, the contact with Rome, the Congregation for the Canonization of Saints. So we had to send all these reports over, people claiming these wonderful healings and whatnot. And so I said, could not he be declared a saint someday on the basis of all these wonderful things? And so Rome always would come back and say, well, we haven't done not enough documentation for this, and the doctors aren't even agreed on it or whatever, or something is missing, blah, blah, blah. So we could never get the whopper we needed, the miracle. But the first thing you have to do is, before the miracle, you have to show this man practiced the virtues, the Christian virtues, to a heroic degree. And it was done by our Father Mike Crosby. Some of you remember that name, okay? He died about 6 months ago. But Father Mike Crosby did all of that hard work investigating all these people that he had contact with, got their testimonies, wrote them up, that he practiced the virtues of faith, hope, charity, prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude, the great virtues. Sent those over to Rome, and they were convinced he could be, he did practice the virtues. So in 1995 already, Pope Benedict XVI declared him venerable. That's the first step toward canonization. Venerable Solanus Casey, on the basis of his practice of the virtues. Then you have to, the next step to be declared blessed, you have to have a miracle, a real, genuine whopper. Okay. So we kept sending over, Richard was involved in this to a great degree. Father Leo died, and Richard took over in 1972, was it, when he took over?
No, 2012.
2012. I'm living too fast, you see. So anyway, the job fell to Brother Richard then to keep this process going. And we get all these reports, of people being healed and so on. We send them over to Rome, and they always find something missing. So finally, last year, there was a woman in Panama. And we have missionaries there, Capuchin missionaries in Panama. This woman had a very, very rare disease called ichthyosis. The word ichthys in Greek means fish. In place of skin, she had fish scales on her arms and legs. By the way, Father Solanus also had a terrible problem with his legs. He had open sores on his legs for for so many years. Tried all kinds of ointments and so on, and okay. You just bore with that with great patience. Anyway, she had this scaly stuff, And so our friars in Nicaragua or in Panama said, why don't you pray to Father Solanus Casey? He has wonderful powers of healing. She said, well, where is he buried? In Detroit, Michigan. I'm going up there to pray at his tomb. So she flies up to Detroit. This is not long ago, a few months ago. She gets to where he's buried, a very simple wooden box or casket there. And every single day, the thing is covered with little notes from people because they come to visit the tomb. And there's all requests, or Thanksgiving prayers, and to take them off every single day. So she's leaning at the next to the casket, and she's praying for her loved ones, her family members and her friends. All of a sudden she hears a voice saying, well, what about you? So she prayed for herself that she'd be healed. And all of a sudden, I looked at my arm and there's just perfect skin there. Looked at my leg, perfect skin there. The scales are gone. Well, that tipped him over in Rome, okay? He wrote that one up and sent it over to Rome, and that convinced that this cannot be explained. The doctors in Panama, doctors everywhere said, we cannot explain this one, okay? This was not supposed to happen. So at that point, then, Pope Francis declared him to be Blessed Solanus. And they had a huge ceremony in Detroit on November 18th. And they had to rent the Detroit Lions football stadium to get all the people in. It held 65,000 people. And people had to stand because there were so many people there. And guess who was there? The lady from Panama. They asked her to come and present, what was it, Brother Richard? The relic of Father Solanus in front of the picture, a life-size picture of him hanging there in the middle of the football stadium. So there she is, with this little relic. And they had a big, special ceremony for that. So she's a living, walking miracle. Father Solanus always used to say, I have two great loves, the sick and the poor. For the poor, he was very instrumental in starting, during the Depression years, a soup kitchen for the hungry, like we have at St. Ben's right now. But it began in Detroit. He got the secular Franciscans, the Third Order of St. Francis. He got them involved and said, why don't you start this, People are coming to our monastery door during the Depression and asking us for a sandwich or something. They need more than that. He said, can't you get your people together, and there's an empty building next to the monastery. It's got a nice oven and stove, and make a nice hot stew or something, and some good or nice home-baked bread, and let people come to the little soup kitchen. So they began that. Secular Franciscans began that. It's going on, to this day there are now 3 locations, right? 3 locations of the Capuchin Soup Kitchen. Every year there's a fundraiser called the Sock Dinner, S-O-C-K. SOCK stands for Save Our Capuchin Kitchen. And business people get involved in that, you know, and there's all kinds of donations keep pouring in to keep the soup kitchen going. And that was the sick and the poor, my two great loves. Another wonderful story. When he was in Huntington, he had charge of the bees, the beehives. We had our own honey. And he loved the bees. And they never wore any protective clothing. He worked out there in his habit, and he reached in there, you know, into the beehive and whatnot. And one time he was all upset because there were two queens in the same hive, and they tend to kill each other off, okay? So he says to one of our young friars, "Oh, come and help me get the extra queen out of the hive." And this guy says, "Father, I'm from New York. I can't tell the queen bee from the queen Mary." So what happens? Father reaches in with his bare arm, covered with worker bees, takes an extra queen out, lets her go, and the bees all follow her. He never got stung. He used to talk about God's wonderful creatures, the bees. So he loved nature. He'd go for walks in the evening and just admire the sunsets and whatnot, and the beautiful trees we had in Huntington. So anyway, the next step then now see, you could declare blessed Solanus now on November 18th. The next step, of course, is to be canonized. We did another whopper miracle for that to happen. But one more story. He would never work a healing for us friars. He said, "We friars have to bear the cross." So there, okay? He made one exception, however. There was a young novice, his first year as a Capuchin, and that novice year has to go one continuous uninterrupted year before he can make her first vows. Well, the last month of his time there was in July. He had this terrible pain in his jaw, and he went to the dentist, and the dentist said, it's infected. You have to go to the hospital and have some surgery done. So this brother Dan comes back and said to Father Solanus, "Father, please pray over me so I don't have to have this operation. We religious have to bear the cross. But Father, if I'm in the hospital 5 days or more, I'll break my novitiate." That was a canon law at that time. If you're absent from the novitiate house for 5 days or more, you have to start over again for another whole year. Well, Father Solanus says, "Oh, in that case, kneel down." So he kneels down, the Father touches his jaw with his hand, and Brother Dan said, "I felt a great sense of warmth going all through my face. And all of a sudden that pain was completely gone." I went to the dentist the next day, he examined it, he said, "There's nothing there." Made him come back 2 more times just to make sure. Nothing there, it's completely gone. The third time he comes back and said to Father Solanus, "Oh, Father, thank you so much. I am completely healed. I don't need to break my novitiate." So Father says, "Oh, we have to celebrate. Sit down." Now there's some people there. So he pulls open a desk drawer and pulls out 2 ice cream bars. In July. Gives one to Brother Dan and he eats the other one himself. Now how they got there or why they weren't melted, nobody can say. So things that happen. Wonderful. Okay, so eventually I see who's we're praying out for another miracle so he can be promoted and declared a saint. That's my story, and I'll stick to it. And you may have some questions or comments.
Yeah. If anybody does have questions, I can bring the mic over.
You're talking about his spirituality, and I'm sure, I'm sure when they do the process in Rome and whatever, they want all kinds of documentation for that. Was there any indications of the, the usual growth of the spiritual life, the kind of stuff that we had in the seminary, the 3 stages of the spiritual life, or the dark night of the soul, or all of those sort of things. Or was it just, he was unique?
Well, he suffered a lot because of his leg pains and all that. But also he had a great devotions. He prayed the rosary every day. Before he'd go to bed at night, he'd sometimes stop in chapel to pray. And we often found him the next morning sound asleep on the floor. He had fallen asleep praying. So one time we said, "Father, wasn't it hard to sleep on the floor like that?" He said, "No, I slept on the south side of the boards." So when I was there, you could often see him in chapel. When he wasn't answering mail or taking care of the bees, he'd be in chapel praying, or talking to somebody on the phone, or whatever it might be. But he had a great devotion to our Blessed Mother. He had a great devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. He would spend extra hours in prayer. So the signs of holiness were there all the way through his life. It's wonderful. We knew he was special, yes.
Is there ever any hint that he was disappointed with just being a simplex priest?
I'm sorry I didn't hear it.
Is there any indication that he ever was disappointed with just being a simplex priest?
No, never. He was never, "Oh, I can say Mass," And he would, sometimes he'd go out for parish masses. He couldn't drive, somebody had to drive him. But the pastor, there was one pastor, testimony was that when he did say Mass, the pastor would have to preach them, okay? But he would offer the Mass. He said after Mass, people just flocked around him and wanted to talk to him, okay? By the way, I forgot one story. During the Depression years, the auto industry in Detroit was just falling apart. Nobody was buying any cars. So the factories were laying off their workers, and the workers' families were going through very hard times. So one day the owner of the Chevrolet plant called Father Solanus and said, "Father, could you pray for our plant? Our men need work." "Oh, sure, I'll do that." The next day, this president of the Chevrolet company calls back and says, "Father, thank you so much. We got an order today for 45,000 vehicles." I think somebody wants to.
Father Marty, right here. One of the more unique parts of Solanus' ministry was his ecumenical efforts. I mean, there are profound stories about his being able to minister to people of all faiths. Can you speak to, I guess, his approach in sharing the gospel with people?
He would, as I said, Protestants and even Jews came to talk to him. And he said, I'm going to get this straight now. He would often, when people talked, about if they were not Catholic, he would encourage them to at least investigate the claims of the Catholic Church. At least that way. He never criticized anybody's religion, though. Never. He just welcomed them and accepted them and affirmed them in their faith. But sometimes just check out the claims of the Catholic Church. Read some church history or whatever, He would encourage that kind of ecumenical activities.
Marty, the first thing that the Pope said Pope Francis said when he introduced himself to us was, "I'm a sinner." And in Mike Crosby's investigation of his virtues, was part of that also his sins? Or was there you've talked everything about the miraculous things he has done and the good things, but was there another part of him in a sense? It seems like he's superhuman. And, I don't know.
Well,
What's that?
you get irritable, you could get irritable. In fact, one time, because he was the only ordained priest there at the time, and we had office of at midnight before the feast of St. Francis. He got up because he was the only priest in the place. He got up and kind of gave us a little bit of a scolding. So we're not living up to our profession, and we're not doing, we're not praying like we should be, or maybe we're spending too much time, just wasting our time. He gave a little bit of a scolding. So, but because he was hurt, because in his mind we should be living up to our commitments and our vows. So he just gave a little bit of a admonitions, all right. But what he said to people privately, we don't know anything about that. Okay, but he was very ecumenical in that sense. That he would often welcome ministers or rabbis. He would come and talk to him. He just had that kind of gentle graciousness about him that he was open to everybody. Yes.
Are there any miracles currently under investigation for the canonization process?
Any miracles?
Under investigation right now?
Oh yes, Brother Richard can answer that, can you? Is there anything going on right now?
Well, there are several that have been reported to us, and we are looking into them.
Okay.
And it'll take a few years if we do get one, before it's actually processed and so forth. So,
Yeah.
but
Takes a lot of time.
yes, but wonderful things are still continuing to happen.
Well, let me just read a couple. We get every day or every week, month. I don't know how often we get these. Solanus news. Is that a monthly or a weekly?
Quarterly.
Huh?
Quarterly.
Okay. There's always a section called favors reported. Here's a couple of them. A few months ago, I wrote to the Solanus Guild. That's a group of people that continue work for his canonization, and asked that prayers be said for the family of a dear friend who has suffered a miscarriage. Earlier this year, the family received the news that another baby was on the way. This time, 3 doctors lobbied for an abortion because they were sure the child was going to be a Down syndrome baby. On January 9th, 1997, a perfectly healthy baby girl was born. Thank you for your prayers and support. Remember what he would say sometimes? We'll give the doctors a little surprise. So here it is, a perfectly healthy baby girl. Another one. This is about my grandson who's 2.5 years old and not speaking. A doctor thought he was deaf. A doctor put tubes in his ears, but he became infected. I called and asked for prayers from Father Solanus. The infection immediately cleared, completely cleared, and my grandson is beginning to talk non-stop. We begged Father Solanus' help, but now this child of God has not been quiet since. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you. It's not sufficient for what you have done, Father Solanus. Every time he starts to make noise, I will praise God and you. We get these all the time. These kind of reports go into Detroit, to the office. People telling us about wondrous things happening through Father Solanus' intercession. Yes.
Father Martin, did Father Solanus play the violin?
Yes, but not well.
Did you hear him? Did he play in the chapel when you were at Huntington?
Yes. Well, not in chapel, no. He wanted us to sing. He would pray some Irish song and on his violin. We were supposed to sing, probably to drown out his poor prayer. One time he was in the community room with the other priests, and they had the radio on, and he starts to play his violin in that room. So a guy goes up, the car goes up and turns the volume up on the radio. So he got the hint and went to chapel to pray for the Blessed Sacrament. For Jesus, okay. He couldn't play very well. But he loved music. He loved music.
Just in reference to the playing of the violin, in reference to Father playing the violin was to the fact that our family had gone down to meet Father Solanus or ask for some prayers. And we went down on a Sunday afternoon and visited with him, and he said to us, he says, I have played the violin or the fiddle at barn dances. And he said, I would like to play it for you. So he went off to his room and came back with his violin in hand and played several tunes for us. We thought it was wonderful to have him do that. But then when I entered the order and I said to the friars, I said, I had the opportunity of hearing Father Solanus play the violin, and they all kind of said yes, and so did we.
So he was not perfect, you see, except in terms of his beautiful holiness. That's something we're going to remember.
Well, if there are no more questions, I do want to invite everybody to stick around a little bit afterwards if you're interested. Where those gentlemen are standing, those doors will be open, and there's coffee and soda, and there'll be some desserts and refreshments.
My goodness.
Yes, we plan for that as well. So you can continue the conversation, but first off, I want to say a great big thank you to Father Pable for coming and talking to us.
Thank you so much, and God bless you.
About Father Solanus when our son went deaf. I wish I would have, but now it is a blessing, I guess. But you know, you can get used to anything. And yes, I've been storming the heavens on a number of accounts. That would be married. What he misses most is hearing his children's voices. He's married and has 3 little ones, and he said that's what he misses. You know, because he's never heard their voice. You know, and I said, yeah. And then I go in the other room and I cry. That would be very hard. Just as a mom. Our son was deaf. He lost his hearing when he was 2 and what he misses now, I mean, I've come to grips with it. I don't like it. He knows I don't like it, but we're okay. And he's well-grounded as a man. But what he misses is not hearing his
Sister, I'm so glad you're able to make it.